So I really should get myself a remote control for this camera. Okay, hello, and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to talk about censorship on social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Google. Well, Google is a search engine, Facebook, and all the things that have been happening now lately with Hunter Biden controversy, the censorship of speech. They call it speech from the right, you know, alt-right or whatever, and it isn't what is happening. Most of the people who get censored today is not alt-right. They are not Nazis. They are not racist. They are not actually saying or doing anything wrong. They just don't agree with a leftist bias in social media and the left-wing consensus about how to bring the world to a better place. And as we have seen for a long time, actually, this started way back, probably been going on since the 60s or 70s, but have kind of accumulated into have become worse actually with social media platforms and Google and all this power put in the hands of a few big corporations, which actually are now leaning what we call to the left and are viewing all dissent as an attack basically on themselves. It seems like they have this extreme snowflake-like way of viewing the world, and everything that seems to debunk their narrative is now seen as racist or xenophobic or, you know, attacking women's rights and all this. And they have now turned the whole debate, and they have turned also social media platforms into an echo chamber. And it's really dangerous. You can see that by the way they are censoring real information coming out on the COVID virus. You can't really post opposite opinions. And I do not think it is because that social media platforms are afraid to put people in danger. It is actually a totally political thing, because if they can actually destroy the economy, especially the American economy, they believe that they should be able to get Trump out of office. And it will also put more power into the politicians. You can see it in Norway. We have had like not even 300 dead by COVID. We have now used basically 1,000 billion kroner on this craziness, and it's breaking the economy, and it's not good. But if you say something against this, you will get censored by Facebook and Instagram. I actually posted a funny video about this guy on YouTube who's making funny videos, and he took the information from the CDC about the COVID, and he just made a funny video of it, and I posted it on Facebook, and I got a message that this was misinformation and it was blocked and everything. And when I was going to have an Instagram ad that was linked to one of my pages on Facebook, I wasn't able to have an ad on Instagram because I had posted misinformation about the COVID virus on my Facebook. So we can see all of these things are now intertwined. And it wasn't even misinformation. Okay, that is the crazy thing. And even if it was misinformation, it is information. And it should be up to people to decide what they want to believe in or what they want to engage with. It shouldn't be up to some big companies to tell you what to think. Now, I am a person of science. I want information that is good, that can be verified by science, that can be... I don't want to use my own beliefs to make decisions, not in my personal life or not in my life in general. And I sure want information that is good. But I'm totally against censoring information that disagree with my views or even disagrees with a consensus in science. I want information. I want all the information. I want all the crackpot conspiracy theories. I want all the information out there. The only thing I don't want to see in the public square is just illegal stuff. Okay, people killing, child porn, all that, all these things that should be censored, and of course attacks on people personally, people who attack people by I'm going to kill you, I know where you live, stuff like that can actually be censored because you don't want personal attacks, and you also and also liability, if you call somebody, you tell lies about people, but then you can actually do a civil suit against the person who actually comes with the misinformation about you. So, and this is also what makes social media platforms so dangerous, because they has an exception from the liability laws. They are not actually, and that is the whole debate in America now and about Google and Twitter and all this. They are not responsible. They can't be sued for what is actually put on the platforms. And they got this exemption from liability suits because they should be able to build up these platforms. There should be a free flow of information. If they were liable for the content on their platforms, they would be sued all the time, and it would be impossible to make make Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these things. But now they are actually using these platforms to push their political agenda, and that is where it all goes wrong. Free speech has to be absolute, and when these big companies have monopoly on the so-called truth, and they are leaning left-wing, they are suppressing information that goes against left-wing consensus. They're actually turning these platforms into a mini or even bigger problem that censorship in China or censorship in North Korea. They are creating a brave new world like 1984. They are starting to chip off freedoms one by one. In the end, you will only have one opinion, and it will be a catastrophe for modern Western society, because our society is built on free information and free speech. I mean, free speech is the mother, father, daughter, and grandfather and everything of all the other freedoms we have. Without free speech, there is nothing left. And that is why all the dictatorships in history has been tramping down on free speech. I mean, you can go back to the Romans, you can go back to the Greeks, and you see they even then tried to muffle free speech. Was killed, was it not Socrates? Well, whatever. He had to drink. What is a philosopher called again? I can't. The name just disappeared. But of course, he had to drink a glass of he drank a glass of poison after a party, and he was ordered by the politicians back then to kill himself because he had spread misinformation about the gods or about what was consensus. And he said, He killed himself. He could have retracted it, but he said what was his, gee, I should have written this down. The unconsidered life is not worth living. He was saying that if I can't speak the truth, there is no point. And that is really, 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 I mean, amazing to hear a person actually wanting to give away his life for free speech, over 2,000 years ago. Anyway, back to the media. The Biden situation is that Hunter Biden delivered a computer full of information, full of pictures, videos. I've heard there was some illegal porn on it. I'm not sure if that is true, but beside the point. But all this information show clearly that Biden was a corrupt politician. And Google and Facebook and Twitter are now censoring this information. There was actually a New York Post article that blew this door open. And then, as you know, Twitter and Facebook censored it. And I just find it so scary to see that the far left or the left is now turning back the clock, back to the time of the gulags, back to the time of censorship. And for many years, the left actually were fighting for free speech. But now the tables are turned and they are fighting against free speech. And they are using these platforms to do it. I can also see in different groups, I mean, when people are discussing like Donald Trump and they are discussing these things, it is so much misinformation. There is so much ignorance. There is so much bullshit, so much bias. I mean, the first thing you have to do to become a little bit smarter and a little bit more informed, it is to doubt your own opinions the most. And make sure that you are getting the correct information. And when you get information that debunks your own opinions, the right thing to do is taking your former opinions and put them into the dustbin like yesterday's diapers, okay? And then you just grow your base of information and you're basically right again until another person debunks this thing. But the most important thing you can do for yourself is to get all the information. There are crackpot conspiracy theories out there that the Jews did the 9/11 thing, and you know, there's a lot of bullshit out there that you have secret world governments, which you don't have. But you, in the United States, you do have what's called what do they call it? You know, well, you do have fake news. There's no doubt about it, because I've been follow American politics now since Donald Trump started to become was trying to become president, and the news has become more and more fake. I mean, Biden said that the reason he went into the fight to become president was that Donald Trump said there were fine people on both sides, that he actually said the Nazis were fine people. but that is debunked a gazillion times, and they keep running with it anyway. If you look at the video, what Trump actually is saying, he was first saying that he wasn't talking about the Nazis and the Antifa people that were bad people. That was the Nazis were bad people, should be rejected always. But then he says, but there were also fine people on both sides that were there to demonstrate against taking down the statues. And I find it amazing that people or journalists in America at CNN and MSNBC, these big companies, do not debunk this. I find it strange that it wasn't debunked in the first debate with Trump and Biden. I found it stunning that Trump himself didn't debunk it, because, I mean, the videos are out there. So, but anyway, back to censorship. Censorship is the biggest threat that humanity faces, in my opinion. It is not climate change, it isn't, I mean, yeah, it isn't climate change, it isn't war, it is simply this one thing: censorship of speech. And the fact that so many people do not respect free speech enough to be willing to fight for or to keep free speech alive. And as I can see it now, it mainly comes from the left. It is the left that is attacking free speech. And they must stop. I mean, seriously, do you really believe that hearing other people's opinions are so dangerous that you are willing to sacrifice the only thing that keeps modern society and our freedoms alive? Free speech, free thought, free debate. I mean, if you are on the left, which I basically used to be, still am in a way, you should be against this. You should be against censorship. But I see that they are so much in love with their own agenda, and maybe that is something inherent with leftist ideology, that they always want to basically use other people's money. They want to take away people's freedoms to push their socialist agenda. And there is something dictatorial with the core of the left that always will lead, if you give them the power, would lead to the gulags. It is basically the same as other religions, like Christianity or Islam or whatever. If you give them, you know, Christianity today has a nice face. Oh, it's all about love and all about this. But you know it's not really true. If you gave the religious the power back, which they had for thousands of years, they would drown us in violence like they used to be. But because they have had to conform to modern society, they are now basically muffled into something more positive. Now, when it comes to Islam, the problem is still huge, and it also is about the scripture and stuff, but that can be another video. This was about free speech, and I want to play a small clip of all the way back to, I think it was 2007, when I first saw Christopher Hitchens speak in a video on YouTube, and it's called just Free Speech by Christopher Hitchens. It's a lecture he had in I think it was freedom of speech. Where was it? I'm not sure where it was, but actually it is in a university in America, and he has this talk about free. And I will actually post a video after this, so you can see the video in its entirety. You just download it from YouTube, and I will post it after I turn off the camera here. So I just want to play a little clip for you, which I think is so brilliant.
Fire! 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 Now you've heard it. Not shouted in a crowded theatre, admittedly. As I realise, I seem now to have shouted it in the Hogwarts dining room. But the point is made. Everyone knows the fatuous verdict of the greatly overpraised Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who asked for an actual example of when it would be proper to limit speech or defined as an action, gave that of shouting fire in a crowded theatre. It's very often forgotten what he was doing in that case was sending to prison a group of Yiddish-speaking socialists whose literature was printed in a language most Americans couldn't read, opposing President Wilson's participation in the First World War and the dragging of the United States into this sanguinary conflict which the Yiddish-speaking socialists had fled from Russia to escape. In fact, it could be just as plausibly argued that the Yiddish-speaking socialists who were jailed by the excellent and overpraised Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes were the real firefighters, were the ones who were shouting fire when there really was fire in a very crowded theatre indeed. And who is to decide? Well, keep that question, if you would, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I hope I may say comrades and friends.
Well, that free speech lecture or speech is so brilliant, and he talks about exactly what is happening now. And since I think this was around 2007, maybe 2005 it was made. I don't really sure right now, but I'll also link to it in the description and after this video. But it talks about exactly what is happening now. Back then, this need to censor speech. And it has only gotten worse. And with big tech, they can actually muffle the world now. They can remove, by will, dissenting opinions, and this is the most dangerous thing. So I really do hope that Donald J. Trump wins this election, and that the American politicians actually remove or tell big tech that if you keep censoring free speech, we will remove your liability protection, so that you are from now on responsible for what is posted on your platforms. And I guess both Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these platforms will realize that that would be the death of them. And maybe it will also be better if they actually broke up these companies into smaller companies that were competing with each other, because having a monopoly is never a good thing. So after this you will hear or see this video if you like. That lecture lasts about 20 minutes, 21 minutes. And I will urge you to watch it in this video or go to the link in the description and see Christopher Hitchens talk about the importance of free speech. So, me forgetting philosopher's name and stuff like that. That's part of the program, I guess. I just sit here and talk about the stuff, so maybe you find it interesting. If you do, leave a comment, give a thumbs up, and of course, subscribe to my channel. I want to say cheers with my coffee. You can also find a link to my Patreon if you want to support my work. So, and there's a link to my painting YouTube page, so you can watch me paint and learn how to paint. So go do that. Okay, cheers. And with this, I rest my case and I drink my coffee. It's the best thing in the world, coffee. But I need to get up. Fucking.
Fire! 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 Now you've heard it. Not shouted in a crowded theatre, admittedly, as I realize I seem now to have shouted it in the Hogwarts dining room. But the point is made. Everyone knows the fatuous verdict of the greatly overpraised Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who asked for an actual example of when it would be proper to limit speech or define it as an action, gave that of shouting fire in a crowded theatre. It's very often forgotten what he was doing in that case was sending to prison a group of Yiddish-speaking socialists whose literature was printed in a language most Americans couldn't read, opposing President Wilson's participation in the First World War and the dragging of the United States into this sanguinary conflict which the Yiddish-speaking socialists had fled from Russia to escape. In fact, it could be just as plausibly argued that the Yiddish-speaking socialists who were jailed by the excellent and overpraised Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes were the real firefighters, were the ones who were shouting fire when there really was fire in a very crowded theatre indeed. And who is to decide? Well, keep that question, if you would, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I hope I may say comrades and friends, before your minds. I exempt myself from the Speaker's kind offer of protection that was so generously proffered at the opening of this evening. Anyone who wants to say anything abusive about or to me is quite free to do so, and welcome, in fact, at their own risk. And, but before they do that, they must have taken, as I'm sure we all should, a short refresher course in the classic texts on this matter, which are John Milton's Areopagitica being the great hill of Athens for discussion and free expression, Thomas Paine's Introduction to the Age of Reason, and I would say John Stuart Mill's essay on liberty, in which it is variously said, I'll be very daring and summarize all three of these great gentlemen of the great tradition of especially English liberty, in one go. What they say is, it's not just the right of the person who speaks to be heard. It is the right of everyone in the audience to listen and to hear. And every time you silence somebody, you make yourself a prisoner of your own action because you deny yourself the right to hear something. In other words, your own right to hear and be exposed is as much involved in all these cases as is the right of the other to voice his or her view. Indeed, as John Stuart Mill said, if all in society were agreed on the truth and beauty and value of one proposition, all except one person, it would be most important, in fact, it would become even more important, that that one heretic be heard, because we would still benefit from his perhaps outrageous or appalling view. In more modern times, this has been put, I think, best by a personal heroine of mine, Rosa Luxemburg, who said that the freedom of speech is meaningless unless it means the freedom of the person who thinks differently. My great friend John O'Sullivan, former editor of the National Review, and I think probably my most conservative and reactionary Catholic friend, once said, it's a tiny thought experiment, he says, if you hear the Pope saying he believes in God, you think, well, the Pope's doing his job again today. If you hear the Pope saying he's really begun to doubt the existence of God, you begin to think he might be onto something. Well, if everybody in North America is forced to attend at school training in sensitivity on Holocaust awareness and is taught to study the final solution, about which nothing was actually done by this country or North America or the United Kingdom while it was going on. But let's say, as if in compensation for that, everyone's made to swallow an official and unalterable story of it now, and it's taught as the great moral exemplar, the moral equivalent of the morally lacking elements of the Second World War, the way of stilling our uneasy conscience about that combat. If that's the case with everybody, as it more or less is, and one person gets up and says, you know what, this Holocaust, I'm not sure it even happened. In fact, I'm pretty certain it didn't. Indeed, I begin to wonder if the only thing is that the Jews brought a little bit of violence on themselves. That person doesn't just have a right to speak. That person's right to speak must be given extra protection, because what he has to say must have taken him some effort to come up with, might contain a grain of historical truth, might in any case give people to think about why do they know what they already think they know. How do I know that I know this, except that I've always been taught this and never heard anything else? It's always worth establishing first principles. It's always worth saying, what would you do if you met a Flat Earth Society member? Come to think of it, how can I prove the Earth is round? Am I sure about the theory of evolution? I know it's supposed to be true. Here's someone who says there's no such thing, it's all intelligent design. How sure am I of my own views? Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus and the feeling that whatever you think, you're bound to be okay because you're in the safely moral majority. One of the proudest moments of my life, that's to say, in the recent past, has been defending the British historian David Irving, who is now in prison in Austria for nothing more than the potential of uttering an unwelcome thought on Austrian soil. He didn't actually say anything in Austria. He wasn't even accused of saying anything. He was accused of perhaps planning to say something that violated an Austrian law that says only one version of the history of the Second World War may be taught in our brave little Tyrolean republic. The republic that gave us Kurt Waldheim as Secretary General of the United Nations, a man wanted in several countries for war crimes. You know, the country that has Jörg Haider, the leader of its own fascist party, in the cabinet that sent David Irving to jail. You know the two things that have made Austria famous, given it its reputation, by any chance? Just while I've got you. I hope there are some Austrians here to be upset by it. Well, a pity if not, but the two great achievements of Austria are to have convinced the world that Hitler was German and Beethoven was Viennese. Now to this proud record they can add, they have the courage finally to face their past and lock up a British historian who's committed no crime except that of thought and writing. And that's a scandal. And I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass. Now, I don't know how many of you don't feel you're grown up enough to decide this for yourselves and think you need to be protected from David Irving's edition of the Goebbels diaries, for example, out of which I learned more about the Third Reich than I had from studying Hugh Trevor Roper and A.J.B. Taylor combined when I was at Oxford. But for those of you who do, I'd recommend another short course of revision. Go again and see not just the film and the play, but read the text of Robert Bolt's wonderful play, Man for All Seasons. Some of you must have seen it, where Sir Thomas More decides that he would rather die than lie or betray his faith. And at one moment, More is arguing with a particularly vicious witch-hunting prosecutor, a servant of the king and a hungry and ambitious man. And More says to this man, You'd break the law to punish the devil, wouldn't you? And the prosecutor, the witch hunter, says, break it? He said, I'd cut down every law in England if I could do that, if I could capture him. And More says, yes, you would, wouldn't you? And then when you'd corner the devil and the devil turned round to meet you, where would you run for protection? all the laws of England having been cut down and flattened, who would protect you then? Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that every time you violate or propose to violate the free speech of someone else, you, in potentia, you're making a rod for your own back, because the other question raised by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is simply this. About the censorious instinct, we basically know all that we need to know, and we've known it for a long time. It comes from an old story about another great Englishman, sorry to sound so particular about that this evening, Dr. Samuel Johnson, the great lexicographer, author of the first, compiler, I should say, of the first great dictionary of the English language. When it was complete, Dr. Johnson was waited upon by various delegations of people to congratulate him, of the nobility, of the quality, of the commons, of the lords, and also by a delegation of respectable ladies of London who attended on him in his Fleet Street lodgings and congratulated him. Dr. Johnson, they said, we are delighted to find that you have not included any indecent or obscene words in your dictionary. Ladies, said Dr. Johnson, I congratulate you on being able to look them up. Anyone who can understand that joke, and I'm pleased to see that about 10% of you can, gets the point about censorship, especially prior restraint, as it's known in the United States, where it's banned by the First Amendment to the Constitution. It may not be determined in advance what words are apt or inapt. No one has the knowledge that would be required to make that call, and, more to the point, one has to suspect the motives of those who do so. In particular, the motives of those who are determined to be offended, of those who will go through a treasure house of English, like Dr. Johnson's first lexicon, in search of filthy words to satisfy themselves and some instinct about which I dare not speculate. Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I'm glad that you applaud, because it's a very great problem for those who oppose this motion, isn't it? How are they going to ban religion? How are they going to stop the expression of religious loathing, hatred, and bigotry? I speak as someone who's a fairly regular target of this, and not just in rhetorical form. I have been the target of many death threats. I know within a short distance of where I'm currently living in Washington, I can name 2 or 3 people whose names you'd probably know who can't go anywhere now without a security detail because of the criticisms they've made of one monotheism in particular. And this is in the capital city of the United States. So I know what I'm talking about, and I also have to notice that the sort of people who ring me up and say they know where my children go to school, and they certainly know what my home number is and where I live, and what they're going to do to them and to my wife and to me, and who I have to take seriously because they have done it to people I know, are just the people who are going to seek the protection of the hate speech law if I say what I think about their religion, which I'm now going to do. Because I don't have any what you might call ethnic bias. I've no grudge of that sort. I can rub along with pretty much anyone of any, as it were, origin or sexual orientation or language group, except people from Yorkshire, of course, who are completely untakeable. And I'm beginning to resent the confusion that's being imposed on us now, and there was some of it this evening, between religious belief, blasphemy, ethnicity, profanity, and what one might call multicultural etiquette. It's quite common now for people to use the expression, for example, anti-Islamic racism, as if an attack on a religion was an attack on an ethnic group. The word Islamophobia, in fact, is beginning to acquire the opprobrium of that was once reserved for racial prejudice. This is a subtle and very nasty insinuation that needs to be met head on. Who said, what if Falwell says he hates fags? What if people act upon that? The Bible says you have to hate fags. If Falwell says he's saying it because the Bible says so, he's right. Yes, it might make people go out and use violence. What are you going to do about that? You're up against a group of people who will say, you put your hands on our Bible or we'll call the hate speech police. Now, what are you going to do when you've dug that trap for yourself? Somebody said that anti-Semitism and Kristallnacht in Germany was the result of 10 years of Jew baiting. 10 years? You must be joking. It's the result of 2,000 years of Christianity. based on one verse of one chapter of St. John's Gospel, which led to a pogrom after every Easter sermon every year for hundreds of years, because it claims that the Jews demanded the blood of Christ be on the heads of themselves and all their children to the remotest generation. That's the warrant and license for and incitement to anti-Jewish pogroms. What are you going to do about that? Where's your piddling subsection now? Does it say St. John's Gospel must be censored? Do I, who've read Freud and know what the future of an illusion really is, and know that religious belief is ineradicable as long as we remain a stupid, poorly evolved mammalian species, think that some Canadian law is going to solve this problem? Please. No, our problem is this: our prefrontal lobes are too small, and our adrenaline glands are too big, and our thumb finger opposition isn't all that it might be. And we're afraid of the dark, and we're afraid to die, and we believe in the truths of holy books that are so stupid and so fabricated that a child can, and all children do, but as you can tell by their questions, actually see through them. And I think it should be, religion, treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt, and I claim that right. Now, let's not dance around. Not all monotheisms are exactly the same at the moment. They're all based on the same illusion, they're all plagiarisms of each other, but there's one in particular that at the moment is posing a serious menace not just to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but to quite a lot of other freedoms too. And this is the religion that exhibits the horrible trio of self-hatred, self-righteousness, and self-pity. I'm talking about militant Islam. Globally, it's a gigantic power. Globally, it's a gigantic power. It controls an enormous amount of oil wealth, several large countries and states. With an enormous fortune, it's pumping the ideology of Wahhabism and Salafism around the world, poisoning societies where it goes, ruining the minds of children, stultifying the young in its madrasas, training people in violence, making a cult of death and suicide and murder. That's what it does globally. It's quite strong. In our societies, it poses as a cringing minority whose faith you might offend, which deserves all the protection that a small and vulnerable group might need. Now, it makes quite large claims for itself, doesn't it? It says it's the final revelation. It says that God spoke to one illiterate businessman in the Arabian Peninsula 3 times through an archangel, and that the resulting material, which, as you can see when you read it, is largely plagiarized from the Old and the New Testament, almost all of it actually plagiarized ineptly from the Old and New Testament, is to be accepted as a divine revelation and as the final and unalterable one, and that those who do not accept this revelation are fit to be treated as cattle, infidels, potential chattel, slaves, and victims. Well, I tell you what, I don't think Muhammad ever heard those voices. I don't believe it. And the likelihood that I'm right, as opposed to the likelihood that a shepherd who couldn't, a businessman who couldn't read, had bits of the Old and New Testament redictated to him by an archangel, I think puts me much more near the position of being objectively correct. But who is the one under threat? The person who promulgates this and says, I'd better listen because if I don't, I'm in danger? Or me, who says, no, I think this is so silly you could even publish a cartoon about it? And up go the placards, and up go the yells and the howls and the screams. Behead those. This is in London, this is in Toronto, this is in New York. It's right in our midst now. Behead those who cartoon Islam. Do they get arrested for hate speech? No. Might I get in trouble for saying what I've just said about the Prophet Muhammad? Yes, I might. Where are your priorities, ladies and gentlemen? You're giving away what's most precious in your own society, and you're giving it away without a fight, and you're even praising the people who want to deny you the right to resist it. Shame on you while you do this. Make the best use of the time you've got left. This is really serious. Now, if you look anywhere you like, because we've had invocations of a rather drivelling and sickly kind tonight of our sympathy. What about the poor fags? What about the poor Jews, the wretched women who can't take the abuse, and the slaves and their descendants, and the tribes who didn't make it and were told that their land was forfeit? Look anywhere you like for the warrant for slavery, for the subjection of women as chattel, for the burning and flogging of homosexuals, for ethnic cleansing, for anti-Semitism, for all of this. You look no further than a famous book that's on every pulpit in this city and in every synagogue and in every mosque. And then just see whether you can square the fact that the force that is the main source of hatred is also the main caller for censorship. And when you've realized that you're therefore this evening faced with a gigantic false antithesis, I hope that still won't stop you from giving the motion before you the resounding endorsement that it deserves. Thanks awfully. Night night. Stay cool.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.